Welcome to Law Call tonight on WMBB. I'm attorney Chris Young with the law firm of Perry & Young, and tonight I'm joined by my law partner Les McFadden. But before we get started tonight, we're going to be talking about catastrophic injuries, wrongful death, commercial accidents. And if you got a question, give us a call at 850-392-1544. You can always email us your questions at lawcall@wmbb.com. Les, we can jump right into this. Catastrophic injuries, wrongful death. You have just come out of about 3 large cases that you've been dealing with and had to handle some of these issues. You know, there's a lot that goes into some of these cases. You know, you kind of take it for granted. You know, I've been in an accident, you know, fender bender, insurance pays, it's all said and done. But when you're involved in or a party to a catastrophic accident involving multiple layers of insurance and catastrophic injuries, it's a lot different.
Absolutely, yeah, it is, Chris. It's you know, it's one of those things when you're talking about a catastrophic injury. You know, you're dealing with obviously like death, dismemberment, something that's going to a life-changing type of an event. And really, when you start thinking about the legal process, that's usually the last thing that's on people's minds. You know, they're thinking about their loved one, they're thinking about the medical care, they're thinking about, God forbid, making final arrangements. The last thing they're usually thinking about is the legal aspects of it, which is really one of the most important things, because that's when we really spring into action to try to collect the evidence, to make sure we're building the case. Because, you know, when a catastrophic injury occurs, oftentimes you're dealing with things like large tractor trailers, you're dealing with vessels, you know, offshore type accidents, something that requires a lot of investigation and a lot of collection of evidence. And if you wait on it, if you wait to get those final arrangements done, you wait to get the medical treatment, you wait for your loved one to get out of the hospital if they've survived, oftentimes that evidence is gone.
Right.
And so, you know, we always encourage people, you know, it's almost kind of offensive to think about a legal action after you've had such a catastrophic injury, but that's really the time that you contact a lawyer so they can spring into action to get that evidence collected so you can build that basis for that case.
You know, as we say this all the time, whether it's a catastrophic accident or just a real simple, I should say, minor fender bender, get an attorney to help you.
Right.
Have someone advocating for you, because the insurance companies always have someone advocating for them. We actually have a really great email question that came through from Tony, and it actually deals with a catastrophic incident. My friend was seriously injured on the job. He has internal and brain injuries and may not make it. His family's having a tough time and do not know what to do. Should they wait and see if he recovers, or talk to a lawyer now? And that kind of segues into what I was just talking about. Hire an attorney to get some help. But Les, you know, there's not this big definition of what's called a catastrophic injury. I mean, there could be somebody could walk, be in a chair and have a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, and you would never know that was a catastrophic injury. But in this situation, he has a brain injury, may not make it. What would you advise Tony's?
Well, first off, you know, what I always tell people when people come in and ask us about their injuries and what do they do, I always tell them, number one, take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Get the medical treatment, see your doctors, follow through with the medical plan, make sure you're doing what you need to do to try to get on the road to recovery. While you're doing that, turn everything else over to the lawyer. All right, we're the ones that are going out to photograph the scene, collect the surveillance video or cameras. There's cameras all over this county and all over this city. I mean, every intersection seems to have a camera on it. But that camera footage sometimes disappears after a couple days or 7 days or sometimes 30 days.
Of nobody's fault.
Right, nobody's fault. It runs on typically runs on a loop. And so depending on how much storage there is, you know, a lot of times that stuff disappears within a matter of days. So getting a lawyer involved can sometimes be the difference between, do I have actual footage showing the incident, or do I not have that footage? And I talk about the incident itself. That's before you even get into the injury aspect of it, because a lot of times, you know, people come in and say, well, it wasn't my fault. That doesn't mean that the other side is going to admit that.
Right.
That doesn't mean that they're going to say, oh yeah, it was I'm the one that ran the red light. I'm the one that turned in front of you. You know, having that evidence showing that this is exactly what happened could be the difference between having a recovery that can compensate you for your medical expenses, compensate you for your lost wages, and not having any evidence at all. And you know, you remember that game of telephone that we played when we were kids? You know, you say something, then you tell your friend, Well, a lot of times we're getting evidence that way. We're getting evidence from this person who told this person who told this person, and by the time it gets to us, we don't even know if that's the truth. But if you have the film, if you have the actual evidence, there's no doubt. So, you know, while you're going through the process of recovering, getting the medical treatment, the lawyer's job is to step in and start gathering everything, getting everything locked down. Sometimes it's a matter of sending letters out to different people because you want to preserve evidence. Sometimes the evidence that you want to preserve may be from the party that caused the wreck. And if you're dealing with a business or a commercial motor carrier or a tractor trailer company, you can actually put them on legal notice to preserve certain things. Logbooks, driver cams, manifestos, bills of lading, toll receipts. You would be surprised at the type of evidence that you can get from a trucking company. I'm using the trucking example because that's kind of my background.
Right.
But I mean, there's so many things that you can find that you can actually reconstruct things that will make all the difference in the world.
So let's dig into your background. Now, thank goodness you've been on the right side for several years.
Yeah.
You know,
11.
Over a decade. I was going to say over a decade.
Over a
now.
decade now.
But there, in your prior life, when you were on the bad side, I have to say that, Les, you actually represented trucking companies.
I did.
Now, that's not a bad thing. But when we talk about having someone to advocate for you because they already have someone advocating for them, I don't know that our audience really understands what that means.
Sure.
In terms of how quickly attorneys actually respond to a scene for an insurance company while a person's laying there, you know, injured.
Right.
The family members are being notified of some sort of injury, and they're trying to figure out what to do while the defense firms and the insurance companies are already building their cases. And so give us a little war story about how quickly someone can respond to an accident.
So first and foremost, I don't want to, there's a lot of good trucking people
Absolutely.
out there. I mean,
Absolutely.
look, I'll say it now, I'll say it again.
But don't take shots at them. We can take shots at the insurance companies.
No, the trucking industry, I mean, they drive the economy, but there are some bad actors.
Sure.
And it's a small percentage of those bad actors that give a bad name to the industry as a whole. So I don't want people thinking that we're anti-truck. We're not anti-truck.
Absolutely not.
We're very much a pro-safety type of a thing. But we want people to do it, but we want people to do it right. But some of the things we do, you know, when I was a defense lawyer and I represented trucking companies, I remember getting a call in the middle of the night, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. I'm licensed in Florida and Georgia. This case happened to be in Albany, Georgia, and I got a call from a trucking company at 2:30 a.m. saying, "Hey, Les, we just had one of our trucks run over a pedestrian and kill him." Within 4 hours of me getting a call. Now, I'm living in Tallahassee at the time. Albany, Georgia is a good 2.5, 3 hours north. Within 4 hours, I'm on the scene. I've got my accident reconstruction expert. I've got my photographer, professional photographer out there to document things. I've got a private investigator out there. We are interviewing everybody that's out there. We're interviewing law enforcement. We're also isolating the truck driver. We're getting him away from talking.
Right.
Because, you know, people, I just looked down for a second. They make that statement. Next thing you know, it goes on a record. So on the defense side of things, we're trying to isolate that driver so they don't say anything off the cuff that could come back to haunt them. Right. But at the same time, we're also locking down the scene. We're locking down the truck. We're locking down the evidence. We're talking to anybody that's on the scene. We're canvassing the area. Before the sun even comes up, we have a very good idea of what's going on.
Right.
Now, when I switch side to the plaintiff side, this is something you and I talked about when I first came to work with Perry & Young. I said, guys, this is something we need to do on this side because it really can create an unfair advantage for the insurance company and the trucking company if people that are victims don't have that same type of diligence on their side.
Well, you know, have someone advocate for you. And the great thing about it for us, we don't charge our clients anything unless we recover for them. So, you know, there are cases that we take and ultimately there's no recovery, maybe there's no insurance or something crazy happened, you know, and we don't charge that client any fee, but you know, we work on a contingency fee, and that's a great opportunity for someone to take advantage of, to have someone represent them, because Lord knows, we both know that insurance companies have people on staff 24 hours a day. So just to be clear, the trucking company just reported the accident to their insurance company.
That's right.
And that's what they did, what every responsible party is supposed to do.
That's right.
It's the insurance companies who are ahead of the game, and they have this great lobby that allows them to have laws written in a certain way that they can actually get out into the scene and gather all this information, whereas the person who's actually injured or their family who is suffering a loss, they're going through some type of grief, putting the pieces back together, and the last thing that they're thinking of.
It's the last thing they're thinking of.
And that's the first thing that an insurance company thinks
and you know, and God forbid, I hope nobody in our viewing audience tonight has to go through that. But if you find yourself in that situation, or if you have a family member or a friend or a neighbor that finds themselves in that situation, I promise you, they are not going to be thinking about getting legal representation when something like that happens. They're not going to be doing it. Do your friend, do your family member, do them a favor. Say, look, I know you don't want to think about this right now. I know you need to take care of what's most important. Go ahead and get a lawyer involved. It's not going to cost you anything. And at a minimum, you know you're going to have somebody that knows what they're doing, knows how to document things, knows how to find the evidence and build the case working for you. So, like I said, I hope that never happens to anybody watching, but if it does, that's what we're here.
Phone lines are open. You have a question about a catastrophic injury, or maybe one of your loved ones or a friend has been through, suffered a death. We're here for you. Give us a call, 850-392-1544, or you can always email us at lawcall@wmbb.com. We're going to take our first break of the evening, and we'll be back in just a moment. And welcome back to Law Call on WMBB. I'm attorney Chris Young with the law firm of Perry & Young. Phone lines are open, so if you have a question, feel free to give us a call at 850-392-1544, or you can always email us at lawcall@wmbb.com. Les, when we left on to the break a while ago, we were talking about catastrophic injuries, but one of the things that we just kind of surfaced over there was a traumatic brain injury. We commonly refer to that as a TBI.
Right.
But what most people don't realize, it can also be a hidden injury as well.
Very much so.
And I know that you have dealt with a lot of cases over the last couple of years where some of our clients have suffered a TBI, and it's very lasting, and it's hard to I guess kind of describe that to someone who's not walking in that person's shoes.
Sure. The most common traumatic brain injury really that we deal with on a fairly regular basis is concussion. Right. People, you get hit, your head gets rattled around, you get rear-ended, your head goes back, hits the headrest, T-boned, it kind of does this circular type of thing. Concussions are very common. We mostly associate those with sports, obviously, which, football, baseball, basketball, things like that. But a concussion is, by definition, a mild traumatic brain injury. Right. Now, the thing with traumatic brain injury is, like Chris said, it's a hidden injury. You don't really know about it unless you get in to talk to somebody about it, or they tell you certain things. I've got headaches, or I'm seeing spots, or my vision is blurry. I've had people tell me that things taste differently. I'm tasting more salt. I mean, it's really kind of odd how they manifest themselves, but there's different ways that a traumatic brain injury can manifest themselves. sometimes we deal with major or moderate to major traumatic brain injuries. And even in those types of cases, how do you diagnose it? Well, I've had cases where people have had MRIs, they've had CT scans, and everything looks normal. The brain looks normal. There's no what they call a midline shift where the brain is slid over from one side to the other. There's no bleeding, there's no swelling, but they're demonstrating signs of traumatic brain injury. And so in that sort of a situation, what we do is we send them off to what's called neuropsychological testing. And what it is, it's a battery of tests that people go through. And it tests the way your brain processes things. It tests everything from your memory, long-term memory, short-term memory, processing, problem-solving type things. And then based on this battery of tests, it can show you where the deficits are in your brain activity. But the way when we're typically building up a traumatic brain injury case, we want to get that baseline testing because most people don't go into an accident with a brain injury and say, oh yeah, by the way, here's my neuropsych testing from 2 years ago that shows I'm perfectly normal. So you have to build a baseline first. You start off with their educational records, their college, high school records, things like that. You start your battery of tests, you find out where the deficits are, and then after 12 to 18 months, things start to level out and you do another battery of tests. And you can measure the improvement, and then what you're left with, the deficit, is really kind of your brain injury. But I said all that gobbledygook and just to say this, it's a process. Right. Again, just like the trucking case, just like when you're building the case from the ground up with the evidence and the surveillance, a traumatic brain injury is the same thing. You've got to build the case from the ground up, which is another reason to get a lawyer involved very early, because we're trained to know those sorts of things and how you build a case like that.
So just got a text message about a TBI issue, and it basically, the question is what happens when that person thinks that they're okay and they still want to make the decisions on their case, but knowing good well the attorneys know that they're not competent to make that decision.
Yeah.
Walk us through that process.
Yeah, those are kind of difficult when people think they're okay. And it's not just in TBI cases. We see that a lot with, obviously elderly people. Sure. They think I'm perfectly fine. I can drive. Mm-hmm. I can do this just fine. And the next thing you know, they're in their car and they left their keys inside. Yeah. It's a very difficult thing to do. If as a practitioner, if I see somebody that doesn't look like they have the capacity, first thing I'm doing is I'm talking to the family members. Right. But at some point, you may have to get the court involved. And to get the court involved, you have to have a competency hearing. There has to be medical documentation. You have to have the person evaluated by a physician. You have family members weigh in. This is what mom's saying. This is what dad's saying. This is what they're doing. This is what they're forgetting. And then there's a determination by the judge. And if the judge says, look, with all due respect, we don't think you're able to make certain decisions on your own, you can have a guardianship set up for somebody to make those decisions for them. But that's a very difficult, a very sensitive process.
Yeah, and that guardianship, it's the oversight's by the court.
Right.
And it is locked down basically like Fort Knox. It's a very protective procedure. And it's a way to make sure that someone's their assets are secure, their decisions are made on their best interest. And there's a lot of times that individuals fight that, and it's hard to let somebody know that you have to have somebody to help you make some very, everyday decisions that you would consider easy, and this person's struggling to make.
And they're very tricky because, like you said, a lot of times people want to fight it. Even though the guardianship process, everything is always done in the best interest of the ward or the individual. We say ward like a child, but sometimes people, they don't have the capacity for it. Capacity matters when it comes to making decisions, but also matters when it comes to things like making a final decision on settling a case or making a decision on whether do I sign this release or not. That's one of the things as practitioners, if we've got somebody with a brain injury, we're always going through those extra steps to say, look, Your Honor, this person has a brain injury, that we want to sign this, is it okay? You always want to make sure you have that judicial blessing over those sorts of things, because sometimes that can come back to bite you if you're not careful about it.
Les, we're talking about the injury side of things and why you should hire an attorney to represent you, because let's just face it, the other side has an attorney representing them. Right. But while we, I should say, are worried about someone's injury and helping get their life put back together, the insurance company is worried about their bottom line, their bottom dollar. And they want to delay settlement as long as possible, because that means they get to keep their money in their bank for that longer period of time. But there's multiple layers of insurance coverages that are available, and sometimes you have multiple insurance companies that you are fighting, trying to get our clients taken care of and compensated for the injuries that they sustain.
Right.
So, in Florida, we're a no-fault state. So let's just, assume for the sake of argument this accident happens in Florida. Well, right off the bat, we have what's called PIP insurance, and it does not matter if you're not at fault or not. It's no-fault insurance, and it pays the first $10,000. After that, if you're getting to an issue where you're having a commercial vehicle policy that's applicable, I believe you just got out of a large trucking issue where there were multiple layers of insurance, and it took, not an army, but it took a small force to figure out who was responsible for what on the first level.
Right, right.
And Lord knows if we had problems with it, well, not problems with it, but if we had to actually digest it and figure out what level was who pays first, working with the defense counsel, someone trying to do it themselves is almost impossible.
Yeah, the big takeaway from that is this. We're obviously trained in dealing with insurance regulation, insurance policies, and dealing with injuries that trigger insurance. You mentioned the word no fault. I can't not tell you how many people have said, well, it's a no fault state, so I can't sue anybody. That's not what that means. No fault, it means that in the state of Florida, every insurance policy that's written in this state has a type of coverage on it called personal injury protection. We call it PIP, PIP. If you're involved in a wreck, you're entitled to a medical benefit through that PIP insurance, whether it's your fault for that wreck or somebody else's fault or nobody's fault. Let's say a deer ran out in front of you and you ran off the road and you got hurt. You get PIP insurance if you're involved in a wreck, regardless of the fault. No fault, you still get a benefit through the PIP. That's what no fault means. Now, beyond that, we're looking at bodily injury liability coverage. That's the type of insurance that the person that caused the wreck, if they have bodily injury liability coverage, that is the coverage that will compensate you for your injuries, for your lost wages. Property damage liability. If they cause a wreck, they have property damage liability to fix your car or to total your car out. Uninsured motorist coverage. That is insurance that you buy on your own policy in the event you're injured by somebody that doesn't have insurance or doesn't have enough insurance. And in the state of Florida, since bodily injury liability coverage is not required, we're the only state in the country that has that. Did you hear me? We're the only state in the country that does not require bodily injury liability coverage.
Can you say it one more time?
We're the only state in the country that does not require bodily injury liability coverage, meaning that if you get hit by somebody in the state of Florida, chances are you're going to get hit by somebody that doesn't have insurance or doesn't have enough insurance to compensate you for your medical expenses. That's why you buy uninsured motorist coverage, because the odds are that, I don't know how many gamblers we have out there in the audience, but if you like to play the odds are if you're going to be in a wreck, you're going to need your own insurance to take care of you. So there's multiple layers of insurance. Then you get into the commercial carriers where, well, this person insures up to $1 million, and this person insures from $1 million to $5 million, and this is $5 to $10 million. And
well, we're not paying unless the first one pays until,
It is so complicated. There's so many traps and landmines that if you try to, what's the old saying? A person that represents themselves
has a fool for a client.
That's exactly right. And a fool for a lawyer.
There you go. We're going to take our last break of the evening. Phone lines are still open, 850-392-1544. You can always email us at lawcall@wmbb.com. Be back to you momentarily. So Les, I don't think we got any phone calls tonight, but our phones have been blowing up here with text messages with compliments from individuals saying, thank you for the information, thank you for the information, thank you for the information. Did not know that. Thank you for the information, thank you for the information.
I think there was one in there that said, y'all are so good looking too.
That was on your. That
was my phone.
That was your phone, man. That was your phone. That was your wife, man, that said that. So
that's right.
Yeah, right. Well, we're in the last segment of our show this evening, and it's our time that we kind of give some shout outs. And I'm gonna let you go first because I got to look up one here. We got some from Ted Howell, but Golden, before we do this, I'm gonna let Les go forward.
Okay. So shout out first off, Miss Pam. It's been a long time. I need to talk to you, girl. But thank you for watching. Rick at the Marlin. I hope you're having a watch party tonight out at the condos. Thank you for watching. My mom and dad, my wife, my children who should be in bed by now. I want to give a big shout out to my Aunt Ann up in Abbeville, Alabama, home of Great Southern Wood. Thank you for tuning in. And Chris.
I'm gonna get Kim Purvis is watching. She's friends with Brian Connors. My wife is watching. Ashley, Mom, Deb, Bob, and Casey from Shelbyville, Tennessee. Trey Smith, Judy Smith, Gary Starr. I'm gonna say, hey Rick from the Grand Marlin also. And we have our pictures of Vivian Howell. She made varsity cheerleading.
That's right.
As a freshman.
That's right.
At Mosley, correct?
That is yes, she did.
Yeah.
She did. That's so there's a little thing going on at Perry and Young with freshmen making varsity teams.
Right. We've got Les's kid who's bound and determined to play at North Carolina or Duke, I think, or maybe it's Kentucky. But anyways, congratulations, Vivian. And in our next slide here, we have Miss Heather Howell. She's going to be speaking at a Ladies First luncheon sponsored by First Federal Bank. I believe it's up in Marianna, Florida, but she's going to be at Eastside Baptist Church, and she's going to be the keynote speaker there. So you think Ted's been giving her any tips about public speaking?
He probably has.
Or she's taking tips and doing the total opposite of it?
That's probably what it is, yeah. She's like, well, I need to watch Ted so I can know what to do.
Well, we need, Anyways, but thank you for that because I'm sure it's going to be very informative. Heather is a wonderful lady, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of information shared at that meeting. Anyways, we're going to be back here next week, same time, same place. I'm not sure if you'll be here, if I'll be here, but somebody will be here.
Somebody will be here in
these two chairs. And thank you for joining us this evening. See you next week, and have a great week.